What's up, book nerds? My name is Tara, and today I'm going to talk about things that I love in YA books. I'm a critical reader, so I'm often talking about things that I don't appreciate in books, and I thought that I would take a minute just to talk about the things that really encourage me to pick up a book, or things that when I read in a book make me want to bump its rating up even higher because I'm just so excited to see them represented in the pages of a YA novel. The first thing is sex positivity, and this is very specific to YA literature because it's something that often doesn't have permission or hasn't always had permission to be included in YA books. I love seeing depictions of teenagers with healthy attitudes towards sex, and that includes acknowledging that they have sexual desires. So this includes things like basic information about safe sex and showing communication between partners that they are wanting to have sex. So the enthusiastic consent, as well as that they are going to use birth control or condoms or whatever their choices are when they embark on that relationship together. But along with this, another thing I love to see in YA is when a character ends up alone at the end of the story, or when they choose themselves over relationships with other people. I think it's really nice that there are some novels out there where YAs are not given the idea that you fall in love with your high school girlfriend or boyfriend and then you ride off into the sunset together and you're happy. That sometimes you're making choices that don't include happily ever after in a relationship for whatever reason that may be. Teenagers have a lot of stuff going on in their lives, and sometimes they need to focus on themselves and not on romance. That doesn't mean that they didn't appreciate the experience of the romances that they had. This is sort of an attitude of, it was fun while it lasted, I'm glad I had the experience, but now I'm going to move on and do something else. I also really love to see queer characters in novels, and while I'm pretty used to seeing lesbian and gay characters and they make my heart sing, I also have a special appreciation when I find characters in books who are all of the other letters of the LGBTQIA acronym. So the bisexual, transgender, queer, even questioning, asexual, pansexual, anything that is not heteronormative, I really enjoy seeing in YA. To switch gears out of romance a little bit, I also like it when YA literature makes references to classic works, because these kids are often reading these works of classic literature in school. It points out the value of how texts speak to each other, intertextuality. And a good example of this, just one of many, is Conversion by Catherine Howe. It's bringing in the Salem witch trials, the Crucible, and then a modern day event happening on the site of Salem. So there's a lot of intertextuality here between all of those texts and events, and I think that it just helps put YA books into the greater conversation of literature in general. Another thing I really like is when authors use an intelligent humor in their writing style. So a good example of this, though not necessarily the best example, is John Green. He has characters who are witty and educated. They're making pop culture references to things that are not just in their little bubble of a time period, but things from decades prior, or literary references, things like that. This isn't always done terribly well in YA, and sometimes it reads as a little bit pretentious or a little bit unrealistic, but when it's done well, it's something that really can elevate a book for me, because I do like laughing and I like one-liners in books, so that will make my reading experience just that much more enjoyable. I also really like ballet books, and there are a few of them, but not a whole lot of them, but any book where the characters are in a ballet school, or they're doing a lot of ballet and they're doing a lot of dance. I don't know why that gets to me like it does, but I could read or watch that stuff for hours. I also really like any book with a mystery plot, and this can be everything from an actual technical mystery, something like A Study in Charlotte that I just read, which is based on Sherlock Holmes, or something like Harry Potter that takes on that mystery plot but is based in some other genre. And I think that's because mystery plots just read so quickly, because you're trying to figure out whatever this answer to this question is that the characters have posed, and those are the kind of books that I can just open up and read from cover to cover. These are all kind of thrown together, so there's not always a lot of good ways for me to segue between them, but I do like complicated villains. So I know that has maybe nothing to do with mysteries, but I like it when there's a villain who we get why they're a villain, or maybe what their motivations are for being a villain, and whether or not we agree with those, maybe we can understand what life circumstances have led that person to be a villain. And I think I like that because that's more realistic to why people are villains in the real world, because people do have different life experiences and there's different perspectives that make up why I think that person is a villain versus how they perceive themselves. And I think it just adds a sense of nuance to the story making. Okay, and finally, my last two, and they sort of go together. I love a good competition book. So whether it is America Singer competing to be the queen of her town, or Katniss Everdeen competing in the Hunger Games, or Harry Potter competing in the Triwizard Tournament, competitions give a structure to a book that I really like, and I think that they could just rewrite this plot over and over and over again, and I would just read those books forever. With this and with competition books, a thing that I like in them, but that I also critique in them, but that I secretly like in them, is that this is usually a poor character who's taken out of their poor area of the world and they get to live in the castle. And so when they get to live in the castle, they get to have a makeover and they have this great room and they have all these servants. And even though they're in a really dangerous situation, they do get that little taste of what it's like to be a very privileged member of their society. So that's 10 things that I really love in YA, so don't let anybody tell you that I'm just a curmudgeonly old lady who doesn't like anything in YA books. It doesn't necessarily mean that any one of these things will mean that I love a book, but they certainly have an effect on me, maybe enjoying it a little more than I would have without them. If you like any of these things, please leave those thoughts for me in the comments below. And if you hate any of these things, go ahead and tell me that too, because y'all know that is perfectly fine with me. And as always, book nerds, thank you for watching. I will see you next time.